Hey everyone, Oliver Joyce here with another Swords and Sandals Pirates developer video update. Now, I don't actually have much in the way, or anything in the way of game footage to show you today, but instead I want to show you something a little bit different. And you may notice I'm using a shaky cam here. It's actually the Android phone recording me. And the reason I'm using that is to do with today's topic. Today I wanted to talk to you about the creative process behind coming up with Swords and Sandals Pirates. And what I mean by that is I found a bunch of my old notebooks while rummaging through some drawers this morning. And inside those notebooks are copious amounts of notes on Swords and Sandals Pirates itself, in its current state, and of course back when it was called a game called Ships and Scurvy. Now some of you might remember that because this game wasn't originally a Sword and Sandals game. It was originally a completely different universe, but still a pirate game. And I'll explain the reason behind that soon. But what I wanted to do is flick through some of these notebooks and just kind of go through some of the ideas and notes that ended up becoming the final version of the game, and some of the stuff that was scrapped along the way. It's kind of an interesting process. What I like to do when I come up with ideas is write them down instantly, as quick as I can. Because I can't tell you how many game ideas I've come up with that have just been scattered to the four winds and, lost to antiquity. There is so much to be said for getting your ideas down, whether it's on paper or in a note on your phone or whatever you can be, post-it notes, doesn't matter. You got to write them down. And for Swords and Sandals Pirates, I wrote these notes down as quick and as often as I could. And I've got dozens and dozens of pages of sketches and ideas, which I'm going to go through with you right now. So let's get into it, shall we?
It's time to watch a video, Skeletor.
Yeah, He-Man, let's do it! Alright, that was He-Man and Skeletor introducing the video. And what we have here is my notebook, and in fact another game here which I never am making, called The Greatest Robot in the Galaxy. And this is just basically the average page from one of my notebooks where I come up with the ideas, giant robots fighting. This was kind of going to be a robot version of Swords and Sandals, except with ships and planets you could visit, that kind of thing. I may still make this. This might even be a template for Swords and Sandals 7 or something. Who knows, right? There's lots to it. But I came up with this when I was overseas for a friend's wedding. That's as far as I got. And then I was building another game idea while I was in France. A castle building kind of game. There's plenty of notes on that. There's a little sketch I made for this game. It was called Stoneward Bound, and it was basically like a side-on castle simulator where you have all these little soldiers and household staff all building a castle together and defending it from invaders. It was all about sort of making everyone work together and building your castle up. A little bit like the XCOM's Ant Farm style view. I'd still like to build that one day. I did a bunch of little sketches and notes for that one as well, as you can see here. All the different buildings. I like to do drawings of the things that I come up with, because it helps me sort of visualize. But anyway, some tips on modeling in Blender, and a coffee stain. I hope it's coffee at least. But what I actually wanted to show you, another game idea which was abandoned. Lots of pictures there. All right. What we have here is the very first mention of the game that would become Swords and Sandals Pirates, and that is in fact Ships and Scurvy. Now, as you can see here, you've got a little compass and a ship and an island, the sea monsters firing, and the overlay, the weather. This is kind of like what the game is now, because you see here you have like your panels to adventure, mine, harvest, forest, fish, all that sort of stuff. That's all in the game now, and this is all just from a brainstorm idea I had after listening to a hardcore history podcast with a guy called Dan Carlin, who did an episode once on the great explorers like Magellan and Columbus and Vasco da Gama and all those people, and all the horrible voyages they had on their adventures, and I wanted to make a game about that. So the original version of the game was a little bit more focused on long voyages. Here you have an island, the general store and everything, the buildings, what you can do. A lot of this made the final game, in fact. The church didn't make it, the slave markets didn't make it, the general store made it, the zoo didn't, and the castle became a fort. But I just basically would write down ideas on paper, especially when I'm on trains and things like that. It's a great way, your mind wanders, and here we have, all the various ocean locations. Some of that made the game. This was back when I didn't have the rights to Swords and Sandals, so it was a completely different universe. It had nothing to do with the Swords and Sandals world. Character animations, how the battles would work. A lot of the stuff made the final game, in fact. And these are just... I'm not sure what that page is, in fact. That was another app. I took a break to make another little an app that would track everything you did, from like you write down, am I reading a book? Am I making a snack? Am I watching a movie? The name of the movie, and I'll tell you at the end of the year, you watched 14,000 movies, or you ate 18,000 biscuits, and that kind of thing. I never ended up making the app. I'm sure someone else could make $1 billion from that. That was a little design for it. I shouldn't show you all that in case I want to make it one day. But back to the game, Ships and Scurvy. This is a to-do list, which was basically, what do I need in this game? JRPG character portraits and scrolling text, shipyards, crew recruit screen, buried treasure, officers. Officers didn't make the final game, but I did it in the prototype. You could hire officers for the game, for your ship. Of course, this was the game loop. What a mess. Look at that. It looks complicated, doesn't it? But believe it or not, most of that stuff is in the final game. In the game objectives. This was actually the difference between the game that was Ships and Scurvy and the game that is now Swords and Sandals Pirates. The major difference was that this was a much more of a story-based role-playing game where you had to track down all the captains that betray you. You get points for it, like you do in the regular game, but you eventually just had to kill all the other pirate captains one by one. And I changed that to a more open-world version, like for the final one. Now here are a bunch of island scenarios which my wife and I came up with when we were on holidays in Bali, I believe. And we're not going to show you too much of those because I don't want to give away too many of the game's secrets. But there's pages and pages and pages and pages and pages of those, and we all wrote them down together. And she came up with a lot of them and helped me out. And they'll just, like, you see an injured mermaid lying in the waves. Would you like to bring him on board or ignore him? That kind of thing. So, these were all the items you can get in the game, and they're all in there. And I'm going to jump to the next book in a minute, because I actually drew pictures of all these. These are all the things that you can collect in the game and buy and sell. And finally, a to-do list, which I knew I needed for the art and so on. And look at the date. September 2015. So that's quite a long time ago. So that's the first book. Now, the second book was when I was working on the game. I decided that I wanted to foolishly draw a lot of the sketches myself. So sketches for the island scenarios. Like this is an island with a giant bird's nest up the top there. This is some natives. Some of them were very simple like this. There's not a lot of detail to them. But, there's heaps of them here. They would get more and more detailed as they go along. There's an old hag. There's a Jack Sparrow pirate, very reminiscent. It's funny though, because the more I did of these, I'm not going to show you them all because I don't want to ruin too much of the surprise. The more I did of these, the better they got. So, this castle looks a bit better than the early ones. Not all of them are good. There's the kind of detail. I quite like that one. The Shipwreck. Going over the edge. Characters. Oh yeah, this is what I wanted to show you. Sacrifice. These are some of the items in the game. So, there's coffee and corn and grain, coffee beans or something like that. There's a few different. There's sugar cubes, wheat, all that kind of stuff. So I did about 150 of these little sketches for the game, which is kind of nuts, and more sketches there. Probably a foolish thing to do because they don't really match the rest of the game in their style. But I kind of did it in a sort of a notes, like a captain sketching notes way. Now, when the game changed to become Swords and Sandals Pirates, when, of course, I teamed up with E-Games and recovered the rights to Swords and Sandals again, and I thought this would be a perfect way when to do it, I was overseas again for my honeymoon, and I was actually working on Swords and Sandals 2 Redux at the time, and a few notes I needed to make for it, so there's some notes for that game. Mission complete! Launched February 2017, so that was a great achievement. I was coming up with a little platform game idea while I was on holiday. So I always come up with various game ideas when I'm traveling. It's just sometimes, as my buddy Silas Rowe always likes to say, you build up creative capital when you travel, and you can kind of you get so many wonderful ideas in your head. This was for a kind of Wonder Boy style platformer, and he could turn into all these different characters. He could turn into octopus and fish and crabs and all these sort of things. Each one have its own ability. It was a little bit ambitious. I never ended up making it, but 9 out of the 10 game ideas you come up with, you don't make. And I'd say even higher. There's the 2 little heroes. Very reminiscent of Wonder Boy. There's a little world map for it. I did quite a lot of work on that over the course of a couple of days, but it's good to do a sketch of your game, when you're coming up with ideas, to see what it might look like. But what I wanted to show you was the redesign. And this big redesign was going to be a hex grid, as you can see there. And you'd have 10 different pirate captains. And the winner would be the one who'd done the most cool stuff at sea, basically, who owned the most islands. I ended up losing the hex grid because it just didn't really work. It was a bit boring. But each island would have, how much food and gold it provides you. A lot of this stuff was in the game. Not all that made it, but I had a lot of big ideas. These are the various sort of ocean tiles. And I actually haven't put all of these in the game yet. So when the beta is finished, I'm going to go through and add a couple of extra bits and pieces to the game, like all these items. Diseases, which I haven't put in the game yet, which I'd like to. These are, of course, the sea captains. And rules to capture the island. Lots and lots of notes, which, I'm just skipping through now. But it's so important when you have these ideas to write them in your head, combat notes. These troops beat these guys, course attack plus. All this is in the final game, Island Guardians and Sea Monsters. That's for a different game. Oh, yeah. So that's the end of that one. There are many other game ideas in here, which I'd like to show you at some point. But that's it for the notes.